Alright everyone, there's a very subtle bug left behind in the code, and you might not notice it because it's only really gonna be very noticeable at the higher levels. But I'll show you what it is. Now it just zapped a bunch of bats, but I predict only one is gonna return. And again, we're only going to get one back. So even though I had a flood of bats at first, only one bat respawned. So there's a problem with the respawner. Alright, now in order to see what's going on, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of the hide command that hides the bats in between respawns so that we can see where they're getting stopped. But before we do that, what I've got to do is I noticed that there's a few too many hides. It's like we overdid the hiding. It hasn't caused any problems, but we might as well fix it before we even start. So what I want you to do is, if you go into bat, there's a hide here in Vanishing Smoke. We're going to leave that. But then going up, there's another hide here inside Spawn Bat. So that's in addition to the one that we got from the Vanish, so we don't need that. Throw that away. And there's another hide right here. So right at the end of Vanishing Smoke, it tells you to hide. And then it comes right out of it and comes right out of it here and tells you to hide again. So that's unnecessary. So we'll get rid of that as well. Okay. So I want you to do that first. Now, the next part, you don't have to do. You can just follow along with me. You can do it if you want. And this is the part where we, instead of hiding, we're gonna remove this hide just temporarily. And then we're gonna replace it with set ghost effect. And we'll set ghost effect to 50. And what this is gonna do is, when the bat is zapped with lightning, instead of disappearing entirely, we're going to see a kind of semi-transparent ghost of it that's going to float around the screen so that we can see what it's doing. And then we're going to do the same thing. Then we're going to make it come back here in Bat Appear where it says Show. We're going to set Ghost Effect to 0. Now, both of these things that we just did are just temporary, just so that we can diagnose the problem. And now I'm just going to use that to see what's going on. Okay, so we can see now these are all kind of frozen. And only one of the bats is actually going through its respawn cycle where it glides to a new place and then reappears. The rest of them are all frozen. So what is causing that? Well, the problem is actually quite hard to debug because it involves some of the under the hood mechanics of Scratch, which you don't have access to. But it has to do with this. It has to do with the fact that the bats are receiving these messages telling them to vanish. And these messages are interfering with one another. And in particular, when it's respawning, it has to do this thing here, which involves a timer. So it has to glide for several seconds to a random position. And that clock that it's using to measure the time it should take for its glide is getting interfered with if another bat gets shot and it starts to use the timer. So the trick when you receive these kinds of problems is, and this is generally good practice, you want to watch for when there's too much stuff underneath a receiver. So underneath this receiver, there's a whole bunch of stuff. You go to broadcast, Those are quite quick, but these are actually quite involved commands because they could have hidden timing effects inside them, and that's what causes problems. Okay, so let's fix it. And now is the time to stop watching along and start following along and change the code yourself. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new block, call it bat zapped, because it represents what happens when the bat is zapped. And then we're going to take all of this from inside this if then, and we're going to stick it in there. So now if the bat is zapped, then it does all of these things that it's supposed to do. Now it's tempting to stick bat zapped in here, because it looks like you simplified it, and you have simplified it to look at it. But from Scratch's point of view, this is still as complex as ever. When it receives this message, it's got this long list of things to do, which could be interrupted by it receiving another message, and that's what's causing our problem. So we don't want to do that. What we're going to do is we're just going to do one action which is just kind of writing a note to itself, a reminder, to do this later in the normal course of events. So I'll show you what I mean. So make a new variable, call it bat zapped. Importantly, it's for this sprite only. And then here, we're going to set bat zapped to 1. Actually, let's change the name of this. Just going to do it slightly differently. So call it check for zapped. And then grab an if then. And wrap all this. And then say, if the variable bat zapped equals 1, then do all this stuff. So you can see what's happening here. It says when it receives the message to tell bat to vanish, it's going to set this to 1, which kind of schedules a respawn. And then when this is called, it's going to check whether a respawn is scheduled, and if there is one scheduled, it's going to do one. So now we just have to make sure that this is called at the right time. So finally, in the main action cycle of the bat, which is bat move, if I remember right, yeah, here it is. What we need to do is we need to check for zapped every cycle. So remember, in the bat move, what it's doing is it just keeps repeating this. As long as it's on the screen, it's just repeating this loop. But then after it's either tacked or fluttered around, it checks whether it itself has been zapped. And then that's when it runs our new script. If it has been zapped, if bat zapped equals 1, then it does its thing. And the last thing is, if it does all those things, it should change the bat zapped back to 0. So set bat zapped to 0. Now we've also got to make sure that when the bats appear, that they don't appear with zapped already set to 1. So let's kind of initialize it. So create clone of myself. We need the thing where when I start as a clone, set bat zapped to 0. Okay, let's see if this works. We're just going to restart.
Ouch! 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 Yum yum! Ouch! Ouch! Ouch!
Now we can see them all gliding around normally as they should, in between.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
You can see them gliding around as ghosts in between respawns, and that's normal, and they're all coming back. So now everything works. What we have to remember to do, though, is we put in that ghost effect, which was just a temporary thing. So we need to get rid of that. So this set ghost effect here to 0. You throw that away, put the hide back, and then there's a thing where when it respawns, the bats appear. We don't need the set ghost effect to 0 anymore. Okay, and that ought to work. Alright, so play test it for yourself, and hopefully it works, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you for listening, and if you find this video useful, please hit like and subscribe.